Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about what makes a good game. It's a loaded question. I'm going to try to look at it objectively at first. There's a lot of people online that make comments about whether a game is good or bad, and wow, do they sound objective. They make it sound like their opinion on this game being good or bad is the final word. There can be no disagreement. They prove it with metrics of some kind. So I'm going to walk through those. How I've seen people talk about a game is good or bad. Let's just talk about good ones for now. A game is good because it's popular. It's best-selling. It's got great reviews. It's got a long play time. It's super original. Let's walk through those. And because I don't like talking about other people's games in a good or bad light, I'll talk about my own. So, let's try to figure out what my best game is. Let's talk about popularity. And by popularity, I don't mean that people are saying this is a good game, therefore it must be popular. I'm talking about there's a lot of articles about it. There's a lot of playthrough videos about it. There are a lot of online comments about it. If it's an online game, it's got a lot of concurrent users. Basically, it's popular. It's in the social zeitgeist. Is that what the word is? People basically know what it is, talk about it a lot. It is well known. Among all my games, if I had to pick one, it's got to be Fallout. I'm known more for Fallout than anything else I've ever made. And this occurred even before Bethesda got the rights to it. And even before I think Fallout 2 came out, Fallout went out and just hit some kind of gaming nerve in a good way. And it just, a lot of people started talking about it. It was really cool. I remember talking with people on the team, like, did you expect this? And some people were like, oh, yeah, I always knew this was going to be good. And other people were like, what's going on? But that makes Fallout my best game because it's popular. But let's talk about sales, which is, by a lot of measurement, a far more objective and quantifiable number than popularity. Sales is literally how many units of this were purchased. By this metric, The Outer Worlds is my best game by far, by a huge order of magnitude. And that's even with it being on Xbox Game Pass, meaning there's a whole chunk of people who never bought it, who, based on their play times of it, would have. So even accounting for that, Outer Worlds is, I think my next best-selling game is 1/10 that amount. So if you're using sales as an argument, Outer Worlds is my best game ever. What's interesting is I've seen people use sales as an argument to support a good game. I've also seen them use it as an argument against a game being good. I've even seen some of the same people use that argument both ways. The way they use it as a bad thing is they see, well, if a game has a high sales, it's a casual game. It's not a real hardcore game, or the people buying it are a bunch of Muppets, to steal a term from Eric DeMille. So I've seen people use sales as an argument for good or bad games. But in general, if you make a game and it sells a lot, it's kind of hard to argue it's a bad game. It's sold a lot. Ultimately, that's the purpose of a game. It is a product, ultimately. I also think it's art, but it takes money to make it. It should bring in money. Sales are a good metric of that. But here's something to think about. I've been doing this for over 4 decades. The market has gotten huge, like multiple orders of magnitude bigger. So is it really even fair to compare the sales of Fallout to the sales of The Outer Worlds? Because the time difference between those games is 20 years, 30 years, 20 years. That's a huge delta. the market was so much bigger. So even if you make a game that the same percentage of gamers want to play, you're going to sell a lot more now. So maybe sales isn't a good idea. So let's look at review scores. Also something that's fairly easy to quantify, even though some reviewers go 0 to 100, some go 0 to 10, some go 0 to 5, some do thumbs up and thumbs down. Ultimately, those get converted into numbers on places like Metacritic. So for whatever reason, we can look at these as numbers. In terms of pure scores, my highest rated games are tied between Fallout and Pillars of Eternity. Both of them got an 89. I have never made a game that has made it into the 90s. The 90s are a tough thing to break into. It means that almost every review score really liked you. And some of them gave you perfect numbers to offset people who may have given you in the 80s. It's really hard to get into the 90s. Kind of wish I had, but I didn't. My second highest rated game that I worked on was Fallout 2, and that came in at an 86. And then rounding out the top 5 are South Park, The Stick of Truth, and The Outer Worlds, both of which came in at 85. Now, a lot of people would argue whether those are my best games. I mean, Bloodlines isn't there. Arcanum isn't there. Those scored a lot less. It's one of those things that you may then turn around and go, well, I don't agree with those reviewers, which is why I always recommend, if you want to use reviewers as a prediction of whether you're like a game, what you should do is take a bunch of games that you've already decided you like and hate. And I think it's important to have games in both of those groups. Then find a reviewer who already has reviewed those games and agrees with you in score and in reasons. So read the reviews. If you can find a reviewer that scores them the same way you do and for the same reason, I think you're pretty good at using that reviewer to predict future games. I do that. I think it's a smart way of doing it rather than just look at review aggregates, because then you're going to end up with, I still remember one of my games got reviewed by somebody who started their review, I don't really play RPGs, I don't like them. But now let's talk about this RPG. So that's how I handle reviews. Another metric you can use for whether a game is good is the length. Personally, I don't think this is a good metric, but at least it's numerical and in many cases unarguable, even though sometimes people go, do you mean length by main story or length by all the content, including side quests and everything else? If you use length as a metric, technically Bard's Tale Construction Set is my best game because it is technically never ending. You can keep making levels for it. It's basically a tool. It's a tool that shipped without a game. Although we did put a mini game in for Scarebray. If you want to look at complete shipped games, Arcanum is by far my longest game. It is a really long game. I know people easily can get 80 hours out of it. It's especially long if you consider all the side quests, and you include in that all the quests for getting mastery level in skills. In most skills, you can't do all the skills. 2 of them, the masters want you to kill each other, so there's no way you're going to master both. But if you include that, Arcanum is my best game. It is by far my best game because you will get the most hours for your dollars out of that game. Another metric that's itself subjective, it's a numerical objective measurement, but what it's measuring is itself subjective, is original features. How original was this game? A lot of people would argue Arcanum was my most original game if you just total in features that hadn't been seen before in computer role-playing games. It was such a big game. We threw everything in there but the kitchen sink. So it's hard to argue that Arcanum doesn't have the most original features. However, you could make a case for Fallout because just looking at this game when it came out, it wasn't really like all the other games that were out. So, isometric games had been made before, but they were kind of being phased out. Things were going either isometric real time, 3D games were coming into popularity. I wouldn't say Fallout was original, but a lot of what it did in that genre was original. So some people think Fallout is the one with the most original features. So those are all of the metrics I thought of that you could use to apply to a game. So maybe the better way to do it is, if you can't figure out what a good game is, well, maybe we can all agree what a bad game is. And then you can just discount those. You're like, well, all the games, after we've decided games are bad, the ones that are left must be good games. Well, by that metric, isn't Fallout and Arcanum and Vampire Bloodlines bad games? I mean, they're all buggy. They all had crashes. I know a lot of people saying, I can't play it because of this. So there must be objectively bad games, right? But then a lot of people complain about Temple, which had its share of bugs, but also had bad dialogue and inconsistent questing and bad pacing. So I'm not sure declaring a game bad is going to leave you with the good ones. I think people can find something they don't like in any game. So I think it's going to leave you with nothing. So what's my conclusion on this? It's going to sound simple or pedantic, depending on how you think about it. But I think a good game is just one that you like. If you like a game, it's a good game. If you don't like it, it's a bad game, which is why I recommend people play the games you like and just stop playing the ones you don't like. You can go online saying, I'm doing a public service, and rant about games you don't like, but people may not care about the things you don't like. Those features may be unimportant to them. So there can be people who love games that you hate. Doesn't mean the game is good for you. Doesn't mean it's bad for them. It's a good game for them. And it's a good game for you, despite whether it's popular, whether it's sold a lot, or whether it's got a high review score. If you like it, it's a good game for you. And you can extend this into books and movies. There's a whole bunch of popular, well-selling books and movies that I do not like. But I don't go ranting about them, because what's the point? If you like these things, enjoy them. So I know that sounds simple, that a good game is a game you like, but I don't think anything else people say is defensible. Nobody's the final arbiter in goodness and badness. And reading some things online where people try to pretend they are is bizarre to me. Even with reviewers, they can just say, I didn't like this game because of these reasons. And then that leaves you, the reader, to decide if those reasons are even important to you. But I think that's what I wanted to say on that. People were always asking me, did you like this game? What did you think of this? And my opinion shouldn't matter. If you liked it, it's a good game.